Welcome to the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. Up here in the turret of pleasure. The Emperor's going to take a jump up. There he is. He's going to come and visit. I think I've accomplished a great thing today, because today is, volume 4 of my deep dive into the Kiss discography. And those of you who know that number 4 is Kiss Alive. Now, Kiss Alive is a record I don't know if I actually still own. I don't know if I own a copy. I might. But it has receded into my memory as this kind of disgraceful corporate rock thing that's to be derided and abused, and just everything rock and roll wasn't supposed to be, kind of. And I don't know if I'd ever actually listened to it all the way through. And part of the purpose of this extensive deep dive into the Kiss oeuvre is to educate myself. So I thought, you know what? Not only am I going to listen to Kiss Alive, I'm going to listen to it all at once in a row. Just as if I was a 14-year-old kid in 1975, buying it and going home and blowing my mind. Now, bear in mind, the vast majority of young people buying this record in 1975 were only slightly familiar with the first 3 records. Certainly not many of them had bought them, because at this point in time, Kiss were just about broke. They were living off of Bill Aucoin's credit card. Casablanca had no money. Casablanca had done their stupid Johnny Carson record, which just about completely blew them out of the water. And so at times was tough. And there was a breach of contract of some description between Casablanca and Kiss. And so Kiss said, you know what, we're going to walk. And Neil Bogart's like, no, don't do that. And, there was a glimmer of hope on Dressed to Kill with Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day. In my opinion, easily the best song they'd written to that date. The only decent song they'd written to that date. And it had an anthemic quality to it that just, made you think, oh, gee whiz. So, as kind of a holding action, it was decided that they would make a live album. And of course, this being 1975, it would have to be a double live album. And I will make a video at some point about double live albums in the 70s, because there's a lot of them. And and so they did this. Now, the funny thing about this era was that for the most part, you would do your double live album after a series of successful studio albums, possibly hit singles even. But every so often you'd get an artist who had just not done it. And Kiss were one. Not too long after this, Peter Frampton was another who blew everything apart with a double live album that I think was the best-selling record of all time up to that point. Kiss Alive, shockingly, I think it only made it to number 9. But Kiss Alive was the record that did it for this band. They just shot up in popularity, and it set the table for their subsequent career, which was much more secure in every respect. The record label got secure. This record really saved the day for everybody. And it's the guy that never gets the credit. And this is one thing. I sat down to listen to this, and I'll tell you what, I've been putting this off because I just haven't been in the mood for 76 minutes of Kiss. And I finally said, no, I gotta listen to this. I got the time. Sat down and put it on, and the first thing I thought, they start with Deuce. Now, Deuce to me is a nothing song. It's okay. It's like all of their songs. It's not about anything really. But I immediately noticed that there was one thing that I remember from the original, because I've listened to the original fairly recently, and I remember thinking that it was just a nothing song. This time around, it actually kind of kicks ass. And I'm like, now what could it be? Are they playing faster? Are they playing... And listening to the sound of the record, the sound is good on the Kiss Alive. It's compressed. It's punchy as all get out. The guitar sounds are really good sounds. And so I listened to the whole of Kiss Alive. But when I was done, I went back and listened to the original of Deuce. And I mean, it's day and night. The guys that did Deuce, the guys that did the first two albums are not very good producers. I'm going to be nice and say that. They really didn't kind of know what they were doing. They didn't elicit very good playing out of the band. The band is wooden on those records. Ace Frehley doesn't sound very good on those records, I don't think. Now, in this case, you got a guy. He's not mentioned that much, but Eddie Kramer. Eddie Kramer is the producer of this record. You can, whatever anybody wants to say. No Eddie Kramer, no Kiss Alive, no Kiss, probably. And what he did was they recorded 4 shows on their Dressed to Kill tour. Now, the one thing about Kiss was, because they were touring so much, they got tight. So, they got some recordings from this tour that were sort of okay, except that because of all the antics on stage and the fire and there were lots of mistakes. So the decision was made that they would go into the studio, and the way I heard it was they kept the drum tracks and then basically overdubbed everything else. And I kind of believe that because there's a homogeneity of sound between all. There's 4 different recordings represented here. They all sound pretty similar to me. Now, the drums are from the concerts, and I'll tell you what, Pete Criss plays great on this record. He has these little extra kick accents. When you play live, you build up your repertoire of tricks and things, and in a band like this, every little trick counts, and he is probably at the top of his game on this record, and good for him. The drum solo is quite amusing. There's one point where he's just like on the snare drum for what seems like about 30 seconds. This is not Billy Cobham on drums here. What you get is a really, really, really straight ahead, if ridiculously too long drum solo. But hey, it's 1975. And I went through the whole record. Now the song selection's pretty good, not bad. I mean, I could have lived without "Come On and Love Me." I could have lived without "Got to Choose." "Watching You" is creepy. It's sort of Gene's little prog rock song almost. But the lyrics, we've discussed the lyrics. I won't go further into them except that you get Paul's "Come On and Love Me" lyrics, and then you get Gene's creepy, crawly lyrics. Stephen Coronel has half a writing credit on "She," the convicted sex offender and former bandmate of Gene. And they do quite a big thing on "She." I think that's kind of Gene's spotlight. 100,000 Years contains the drum solo, hence its 12-minute length. And it's interesting because the gig, as it were, ends with "Cold Gin," which is Ace Frehley's song about his favorite thing. And then there's the encore. It's not really stated, but it's, "Thank you, good night" after "Cold Gin. And then they do "Rock and Roll All Night," which, yeah, of course, that's the encore. But no. Then they follow up with "Let Me Go Rock and Roll." Now, if I remember correctly, "Let Me Go Rock and Roll," what album's it on? Is it the 3rd album? It's like 2.5 minutes, and it's a rock and roll song. It's a straight rock and roll song. And here, it's a pretty straight rock and roll song. I can hear in my mind's eye somebody like Dave Edmunds doing a cover of it and making it sound like rock and roll. And a few people, like, another thing about this is because everything was overdubbed later, and Eddie Kramer's involved. Now, I've heard a lot of stories about Ace Frehley. On the strength of the first 3 Kiss records, I think he's not a very good guitar player at all. But, by all accounts, Ace was a little bit of a problem child. And who better to deal with a guitar-playing problem child than the guy that worked with Hendrix and helped build Electric Lady Studios? So, I suspect that Mr. Kramer managed to elicit performances out of Ace Frehley that are probably career-defining. There are a lot of guitar solos on this record. None of them are bad. None of them, a few are kind of maybe a little bit pro forma, but at the worst, he sounds like maybe Mick Ronson, which is not any kind of a slur. And he's a solid rock guitar player, not Mahavishnu John McLaughlin, but does his job with aplomb. And really, and the other thing about this record, and again, because of the overdubbing, is Gene Simmons' bass sound, which is a bass sound I loathe. I cannot stand the sound of his bass. But on this record, it's as good as it's ever going to get. It's got that wooden kind of Gibson sound. I think his crazy basses were made out of Gibson components. I'm not sure, but it sounds like a Gibson bass. And it's in the mix, placed really well. The mix is really good. The fact that it's really punchy, they compressed it through something wonderful, I don't know what. And so it's the perfect souvenir of the show. And it's also, and it's the only knock against this, and it's hardly a knock, is that it was done before they wrote Detroit Rock City. Because had you have put Detroit Rock City at the end instead of Let Me Go Rock and Roll, you've got the only Kiss record anybody really needs. So I owe this record a bit of an apology. I owe Ace a little bit of an apology, because to a formative young mind, this would have been pretty cool. And by this time, by the time this record came out, I was already sick of these guys. I'd heard their first album. I thought it was terrible. I heard the second album. I thought it was even worse. I didn't even bother with the third album. So by the time this came along, I had thoroughly dismissed them, my 16-year-old snobbery. So coming to it at this very late date in life has been a little bit of a wake-up call, because it's not a terrible record. It's actually a pretty good, unbelievably dumb rock record, hard rock record. Got some edge, thanks to Eddie Kramer. The guitar sounds are all very good. Even Paul Stanley kind of sounds like he can play the guitar on this record. It was not super odious. Like I say, the extended sections were of great interest to me, because, you know, like the Paris 100,000 Years, that's where everybody goes to have a pee or a smoke or something while the drummer's doing his solo. That was almost a tradition in the 70s. So, you know, it's pretty great, and it's literally, it made the first 3 records obsolete overnight, and it set the table for what was to come, which was to be, if they had a kind of a glory period, it would be right after this. And basically, yeah, it's probably their finest moment. Who knew? So there you have it, my deep dive on Kiss. God, I'm not gonna even start to promise that I'll finish this, because I realize there's a lot of records, and I know that the quality starts to drop off quite radically not too long from now. So, but I did want to get through the important ones, the formative ones, and this certainly counts as that. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other stuff, and we'll build the channel, as they say. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon.